Well, what's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Premier League Week 15 review. So we have quite a few games to talk about, and this is the third in a very packed game week as well. So, yeah, a lot of these teams are having to play back-to-back-to-back games, and it's starting to show for some of the teams that don't quite have that depth. So, let's get right into it. First game to talk about, Chelsea versus Newcastle kicks off the first game of Saturday. Obviously, as a Chelsea fan, go Chelsea, but looking at both teams, looking at the performance as well as the result, obviously for Chelsea, it's been good to get back into a good run of form. They've been doing very well. Aside from the draw at Liverpool, they've been winning nonstop, and even the draw at Liverpool, they still look the more dangerous team out of the two. And considering how good Liverpool have been in the attack, that's saying something. So, yeah, they've definitely really stepped up their game since they had those few really bad results back to back to back. For Newcastle, though, they did start off very well, but at the same time, they started off very well at Old Trafford, too, and then got beat 4-1. Now they're getting beat 3-1 after starting off very well at Chelsea. So they have this really high burst of energy at the beginning of the game, but then they just drop off, and they just fade out of the game. So I don't know if they just don't have the stamina to keep up that level of play, or if after they get the goal, if they just think, all right, let's just hold off now, let's just drop back, and we'll stay back here. But it really is starting to hurt them because they're allowing teams like Chelsea and like Man U to play. And once you let them get up to speed and get that momentum going, well, they're going to run you over because they've got more quality. That's just the truth of it. So I think if they were able to sustain a bit more pressure on these top teams, I think they would do a lot better. Because if you're able to throw them off their rhythm, then they can't get a good passing going, they can't get good movement going. One of the things that really shut down Chelsea last year when they went to Man U is they made sure that somebody was always on Hazard, and then they always had two people marking the other two forwards, Costa and Pedro up there. And so Hazard didn't have anybody to play to. And so whenever he did get the ball, he was already man marked, and he couldn't lay it off to anybody. And so they couldn't really get a good passing movement going. And so they lost 2-0 because of that. They couldn't ever really get into the game. Newcastle did that very well at Old Trafford and at Stamford Bridge, but they didn't sustain it. So, you're throwing off their game, great, 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 but then you let them play, and now they're back at you, and now they're destroying you. So, yeah, it's something that they may want to look at going forward. They're still in a decent position right now. They're not that worried, but they're still in a position. It's kind of like you lose a couple games between now and Christmas, and now all of a sudden you got something to worry about. So on to the next set of games. First off, West Brom Palace. Two teams that really needed a result, and two teams that did not get the result that they needed. This has happened to Palace a few weeks now where they needed to get a win and then didn't. Midweek it was at Brighton. They needed a win out of that game and then got a draw. This one at West Brom needed a win out of that game, got a draw. I will say that 2 draws on the road is not a terrible result for Palace, but in the position that they're in because of how poorly they started, it is a poor result. At this point, you need to start winning these games against the lower sides, especially because West Brom have been playing so poorly. Yes, they just got a new manager. Yes, they stepped up since Tony Pulis was sacked, but they still haven't looked good. They still haven't really looked like the West Brom side that can trouble the top teams that we've seen in the past few years. So, yeah, Alan Pardew comes in for his first game and only gets a draw at home. For West Brom, that's a little bit worrying, especially because Palace have not been the best team either this season. Both teams are going to look at this and say, we couldn't score. Yes, we both kept a clean sheet, but we needed a win out of that game. Both of us needed to win. And so, because I couldn't watch it, I can't tell if they actually went for it or if it was just kind of both of them were a bit nervous because they've both been playing pretty poorly this season. But, like I said, neither team needed a draw yesterday or Saturday. They both needed a win out of that, and so it's going to be frustrating for both of them. Then you got Watford Spurs. Spurs dropped more points again. And, Watford have been playing really well this season. They've been probably one of the surprise teams. Them and Burnley have both been really, really good. So seeing them draw against Spurs is not a huge shock. But at the same time, for Spurs, it's it's been a bad few weeks, and they needed a response. And going up to Watford, that's a good place to respond, to say, hey, no, this hasn't been us. This has just been a blip in our season. We're about to step it back up. But they didn't. Watford go up very early on in the game, and then they managed to equalize later. But then Watford, I mean, I only saw a bit of the game, but from what I saw, Watford were creating just as many good chances as Tottenham were. And if you're Tottenham, that's not good enough, because one of the things that they've done very well the past 2 years is they've defended very well. They've been able to keep teams from really getting good shots on them. It takes something magnificent most of the times to beat a defense, the defense that they had. So the fact that their defense is kind of wobbly this season and they're allowing goals, they're allowing really good chances, especially from teams that shouldn't really have a whole lot of good chances on you, it is kind of concerning for them. And so going forward, I think that's where they need to really focus right now. They need to focus on getting that defense back to being stable and solid. Because if you keep conceding goals, then it doesn't matter how good your attack is. Just ask Liverpool. But that's one of the things that's been pretty shocking this season so far, is just how bad Tottenham have looked defensively, because that's something that I've come to know about them. But for Watford, though, they'll take a point against one of the top 6. Obviously, they'll be a bit disappointed to not get a win at home, even if it is Tottenham. But I do think the performances that they've had, they'll be quite all right getting a draw at home against Tottenham. So next up, Stoke versus Swansea. 2 teams that have really been struggling this season, and Stoke manages to get a win 2-1 at home. So obviously, it's not it's not the greatest, I guess, performance from Stoke, but they'll take the result for sure. Because they've really been dropping down the table. Getting a win this weekend was exactly what they needed, even if it was only 2-1 against Swansea. They won't look too hard at the performance, because right now what they needed was 3 points, and they managed to get those 3 points. So, but for both teams, it's been a real struggle, not only to score goals at times, but to stop conceding them. It's just, you look at the defense that Stoke has, you feel like you guys should be doing better defensively. Swansea obviously don't have as many well-known defenders, but you feel like they still got a pretty good team overall, looking at some of the players that they've got. And so why can't they seem to put it together? We've seen some really good performances from Swansea, but we've never really seen the results to come with it. It's been, they played really well today, they just couldn't manage to find a goal, and then they ended up losing. And that's pretty much what happened from what I saw the highlights of this game. It seemed like Swansea were creating a lot of really good chances. They scored early on, but then all of a sudden Stoke steps it up, and Swansea doesn't have an answer. And now it's all Stoke, and then they get 2 goals and manage to hold them off. So, I don't know, both teams have really been struggling. Stoke obviously will be hoping to take some momentum off of this game. Swansea will be hoping for a reaction after such a poor result against a team that's struggling just like they are. So, it's kind of a mixed bag for both teams, but I think Stoke will be obviously the happier of the two to get a win out of it. Next up, we got Leicester versus Burnley. This one was a little bit of a shock for me, because Burnley have managed to find a way to get something on the road at games like this. Against other mid-table to lower-table sides, they've been able to find results away from home this season. And even at home, occasionally they'll find a result. But on the road is typically where they're really good. And obviously, 1-0 is not like, oh, you guys are terrible today. They probably played pretty well. But to see that they actually didn't get a point out of this game is kind of surprising to me. Burnley have been playing very well, and on the road is where they typically have their joy. They typically set up very well. They're ready to play. They're ready to hold off the other team and keep them at bay. So, yeah, Leicester, obviously, great result for them. They needed 3 points for sure. But I'll say for Burnley, even though they've started the season very well, I think they'll be a bit disappointed here. Because Leicester have had some really good moments this season, especially the past few weeks. They've really stepped it up. But I still think Burnley would have looked at this game and said, we've knocked off higher teams than this away from home. Why couldn't we do it to Leicester? I guess part of it is probably going to be the constant, back-to-back-to-back games, 3 games in a week. That is difficult. 3 Premier League games in a week is hard to do. But you still expect, they've got some depth on the bench. You still expect them to get something out of it, at least. So I don't know. I don't think this is a sign of things to come because obviously they still only held them to one goal, but I do think Sean Dyche will be a bit disappointed that they didn't manage to get a point out of the game. For Leicester, though, they need some momentum because they started off the season pretty poor, and now they're starting to step it up and get back into the mid-table region. So, yeah, they'll be very happy with the win at home. Next up, Everton versus Huddersfield. Huddersfield really struggling right now, and I think I'll talk about this for the next game as well. These newly promoted sides are starting to feel the strain of having to play so many Premier League matches in a row. Because you play a lot of games in the Championship as well, but they're all Championship games. They're not, especially if you're one of the better Championship teams, you don't necessarily have to have the best of the best every single game. Because some of them will be easier, some of them will be harder. It kind of ranges as far as the difficulty in the Championship. They're still pretty good teams, but when you get to the Premier League, the quality and the physical nature of the game is so much higher that every single game is going to be difficult. Especially when you're the newly promoted team, everybody's a higher quality than you at this point. So every single week you got to put in your best team, or else you're probably going to get beat. You can't put in any B team players because they're probably not at the same quality to play in the Premier League. And so newly promoted teams, when they start to play several Premier League games in a row, they start to feel the strain of it. And Huddersfield and Brighton have both been experiencing this. Brighton obviously managed to hold off Palace at home midweek, but then they've got Liverpool at home. That's a difficult game. Huddersfield got crushed midweek against Arsenal, I believe, and then they've got to go away to Everton. They get beat again. So both of these teams are really struggling right now, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they just haven't had a break. So I do expect them both to step it up next weekend now that they've got a bit of a rest. But anyway, let's talk about Huddersfield first. Everton beating them at home. Obviously, Everton need some points. They need to get something. After a really good midweek against West Ham. They needed another result, and they got it here. I still say I think part of it is down to the fact that they're playing a newly promoted side who haven't had a chance to rest some of their better players. So I don't look at this game and say, oh yeah, Everton have finally got it. And I don't look at the Liverpool game and say, oh yeah, Liverpool are definitely one of the best teams. I look at this as both Everton and Liverpool have enough depth on the field that they were able to get the results that they needed, while Brighton and Huddersfield don't have enough depth, and so that's why they're struggling right now. Next weekend, I expect Brighton and Huddersfield to step it back up. Liverpool probably will drop off a bit because they got a midweek game in the Champions League. But, let's see. I'm done talking about Everton, Huddersfield. Everton, good result for them, good result for Sam Allardyce. Huddersfield, frustrating, but I think they'll bounce back after this now that they have a chance to rest. Going on to the Liverpool game, though, one of the things that I think is really helping Liverpool this season, because typically, even though Brighton have had several games in a row and it's something they need to get used to, typically this is still a game where Liverpool, last season before, they've struggled. They haven't been able to do well against these lower sides because it's like they don't really step up their game in games like this because they're like, oh, this game's easy, and then all of a sudden now this is the game they should have easily won, and then they lose or they draw. So, yeah, this is typically a game where they would struggle, but, 5-1, no problem. I think the reason that they've been doing so well in games like this year is because they finally got depth up top. They still don't have a good defense, and, the fact that they got scored on by Brighton, yeah, you're still not keeping a clean sheet, so that is a slight problem, but the fact that you're managing to score 5 goals in a game is proof that you have enough depth up top. Because you look at last season, they had Firmino, they had Mane, they had Coutinho. And that was pretty much it. You go after that, Wijnaldum could kind of play up there, but he wasn't as good. Aside from that, you didn't really have much. You can't throw Henderson up there because you need him further back. But this season, Sturridge and that was pretty much the only backup you had, and he was injured. So Mane got injured, and you're struggling. Coutinho got injured, you're struggling. This season, they've got Firmino, they've got Coutinho, they've got Salah, they've got Mane. Who's the other one that can play up there? Oxlade-Chamberlain can play up there. They've got depth. And, they picked up Solanke in the summer transfer market. So now you've got another striker you can throw up there. Sturridge is actually back to fitness again, so you can play him if you need to. So yeah, they've got enough depth, and so they were able to rest some of their best players midweek when they played, and still had enough quality to get the win. And then you get in the weekend, and now your best players have been rested midweek. Now you can throw out a full force attack, and now they're not tired, and now they're able to play at full fitness, and now they're able to play well. So I think that's the one thing that's really helped Liverpool this season is having that depth and being able to rest certain players because you've got enough depth on your bench that you can put somebody out there, maybe lose some quality, but still have enough quality to get the win against some lesser sides. So I think that's just been a very important part of Liverpool's season so far. I still think their lack of defense is going to hurt them in bigger games. When they play the top teams, they're going to struggle there. But I do think against these lower sides, they're starting to finally get wins here because they've got the depth in the attack. But Brighton, like I said, frustrating for them, and same as Huddersfield because they don't have the depth. But I do expect them to bounce back a bit next week. Then we get on to the big game of Saturday, Arsenal versus Man U. Very, very entertaining match. I don't like either of these teams personally, but watching this game, I'm like, this is why I enjoy watching football. Because it gets very exciting whenever two top teams like this go all out and really, really just play. That is something that I don't think we've seen Mourinho do against the top teams this season. I don't think we've seen Arsenal do against the top teams this season. They played. They just said, let's play, let's do it, and they went and played. It was a great game to watch. I will say, Man U did get lucky. Obviously, Arsenal had so many chances they couldn't finish. Arsenal did have at least one really, really good claim for penalty. The other one, I didn't really think so. But, the one where Welbeck cut it back and then I think it was it Iwobi that clipped his ankle? But, there was one, it was clear penalty, and the ref was just like, nah. So, they missed a clear penalty. They had several chances where it's like in the box, and it's just like, dude, just have a shot. De Gea was on top form that game, and they just managed to hold him off, and they got very, very lucky to come away with all 3 points. But, for Man U, it won't matter. 3 points is 3 points. It doesn't matter how you got it. It doesn't matter how good the other team were, how lucky you were. What matters is you got the 3 points. For Arsenal, though, they'll be talking about their luck. They'll be talking about the missed penalty. They'll be talking about, De Gea bailed him out. So, you got both sides of it. I personally will say that Man U did get lucky, but I also look at it as it's what Mourinho does. They went out, they went full force, they got the 2 goals that they needed because Arsenal's defense was lacking, and then they managed to hold them off for the rest of the game. Even if it was a bunch of lucky, off the post, off the crossbar, De Gea super saves, they'll take it. It's what Mourinho does. He sets his team up to where it's difficult to break them down. It's difficult to have good shots, and then De Gea does the rest. So, but for both teams, Man U, obviously, they've got the Manchester Derby next weekend. That's a big game. They'll probably be looking to rest most of their players midweek. Arsenal, I feel like they've got I can't remember who they're playing next weekend, but they'll be hoping that they can bounce back from this result because they've been on a good run of form, and even in this game, they looked good. And this is really the first time that I've said that about them this season. They've actually been playing really well. So they'll be hoping to keep this play style, this intensity, just all of it. They'll be hoping to keep that up and not drop back off like they have done in the past. But it's Arsenal. It's typically what they do. So we'll see what goes on. Then we get to Sunday. First off, we've got, I think is it West Essex Derby? I can't remember where Bournemouth and Southampton are from. I need to brush up on my Britain geography. But yeah, so you got Bournemouth versus Southampton. It's a bit of a derby. It's not really a big derby. But yeah, they are local rivals. And so, there was a little bit of chippiness in it. There was a little bit of frustration at times. So it was a fairly entertaining match, but at the same time, it was still kind of, not the same level of intensity and quality as we saw in Arsenal Man U, who aren't, local rivals, but are very big rivals because of history. So, yeah, 1-1 draw, probably on the whole of it, probably deserved for both teams. Both of them played pretty well. I thought Overall, though, Southampton just has a little bit more quality because Bournemouth started the game very brightly. Managed to get that early goal. I think. Yeah. They managed to get a goal in the first half, and it looked like maybe they could hold on, but then they managed to concede one, and Southampton just from that point on looked the better team. So I think Southampton will be happy with a draw on the road. Bournemouth will be upset not to hold on to the 3 points, but I think if both teams look at it, yeah, they both probably deserve to draw. Bournemouth, though, definitely needed the 3 points more than Southampton because, they haven't been playing that well, and they're the closest of the two to the bottom three. But Southampton haven't been playing well either, so they're going to look at this game and say, well, we really needed 3 points here because we need to get away from that relegation zone. But fair point overall. And then the final game, probably the most shocking game of the entire weekend, was Man City West Ham. Not shocking because of the result. Man City won, no shock there. But shocking because West Ham caused problems. And that, for me, is absolutely shocking. Because you got West Ham that's coming off of getting just demolished 4-0 by Everton. And then they come to Man City, and not only do they only lose 2-1, they scored a goal. That's incredible in its own right, but they were actually causing Man City problems. Now, don't get me wrong. On the whole of the game, Man City, obviously the better team. They created the best chances. Adrian was incredible, which is the only reason why it wasn't more like 4 or 5-1 like we were all expecting. But, West Ham was still causing problems. They're still making the defense make mistakes. They're still putting the defense under pressure. Obviously the defense was a little bit different. Mangala was playing, and he's never really proven himself at Man City. But it was still a shocking match because I did not expect to see that level of performance from West Ham. Based on what we've seen so far this season, I was not expecting that at all. I was not expecting them to come out, put Man City under pressure, and really try to hit them on the counter and look good doing it. And for Man City, this has been happening in the past few weeks. They have given away a goal in the first half, and then the second half sort of come back a little bit more of a bite about them and then get a goal fairly early on, 10, 15 minutes in, sometimes only 2 minutes in. But yeah, they typically come fighting back in the second half. They managed to get a goal earlier on in the second half and then either equalize again or later on or win late. Just that little late burst, and they managed to somehow find a goal at the end. And so, typical Man City performance over the past few weeks. But for West Ham, though, they'll definitely take a lot of positives out of that game. Putting Man City's defense under pressure, creating several chances, looking good on the counterattack, and forcing Man City to have to work. For a team that just got crushed by Everton, who have been terrible this season, 4-0, yeah, it's good to see that they were able to bounce back from that and say, okay, that's not us. And now they actually put up a fight at the Etihad. That's impressive to me. So, yeah, obviously both teams will take different things out of it. West Ham lost, but we'll probably take more positives out of the game. Man City won, but we'll look at this and say, okay, teams are starting to cause us issues. What do we need to do to fix it? Because we got a big match next weekend against Man U. If we play like that next weekend, Man U's going to beat us. So yeah, it's very interesting. But aside from that, though, there is one final thing I do want to talk about for this game because I don't know why. It's something that when I heard it, I'm just like, seriously? I'm watching NBCSN, and Arlo White and Graham Lasso are the commentators. And so the goal goes in, David Silva scores to win it late. And Graham Lasso is like, oh, that's a brilliant ball from De Bruyne. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Like, are you watching? Like, did you not see how difficult that was for David Silva? He had to change his run, and he still, even though he changed his run and adapted to it, he still had to, jump up and reach for it to manage to flick it in. That was difficult for David Silva. But you're saying that's a great ball from De Bruyne. It wasn't that good. He just lobbed it to the back post and hoped somebody would get on the end of it, and David Silva luckily was able to turn his body enough and get on the end of it. And that's, I don't know, a lot of people are obviously talking about De Bruyne, and he is the story of the season because, he's playing great at Man City and stuff like that. But that's kind of what that entails. he just dumps the ball in, no thought, not really trying to pick anybody out. He's just hoping somebody will be on the end of it. David Silva manages to get on the end of it because he did a really good job, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about De Bruyne's cross. Oh, that's a great cross. It reminds me of, Ronaldo whenever he scores. Everybody's talking about how great the goal was, but it turns out it was just a tap in, and it was actually like Bale doing a great job running down the side, then a great cross in right onto Ronaldo's foot, and everybody's like, "Oh, Ronaldo's the best." So I don't know, just something a little funny to talk about, but that's about it for this weekend. Overall, it was an exciting weekend after 2 games back to back, and then you got a third one back to back to back. I mean, it can throw a lot of teams off. Some of the newly promoted teams struggled. The top teams have generally had enough depth to deal with it, but then Tottenham don't have enough depth, and that's why they're starting to drop off a bit. Arsenal though playing well. Man U just a little bit better defensively. Man City, they're winning. Yes, they've got a great winning streak, but the gaps are there, the flaws are there, and you got to wonder, is this the time where they start dropping off because all of these games are coming so fast and the pressure is building on them as well? I don't know. It's getting really exciting though, and obviously next weekend we've got a lot more games to look at. You got the Merseyside derby, you got the Manchester derby to look at, and then some midweek games in the Champions League as well. So some of the top teams are going to not have a rest after all of these games back to back to back to back. Now you got another game midweek. Then you got some really big games in the weekend. It's getting pretty hectic for some of these teams, so I'm really excited to look forward and see what's coming. So hopefully you guys are too. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on this weekend? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Premier League week reviews, and I'll see you guys next weekend. Peace out.